From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got a great show ahead for you today. We're going to be checking in with a guest from the past. That's Dr. Ed Gatz, who is the person who had, his family had the miracle that propelled St. Jeanne Jugan to sainthood. And as a youngster, I remember going to a home of the Little Sisters of the Poor, where I grew up in the Chicago area, and the great work that they did for those elderly poor and continue to do all around the world is amazing. And their foundress, Jeanne Jugan, is a saint, thanks to a miracle that we'll be finding out about later in today's show. And we'll be checking out a conversation with Mike Aqualina. He's the prolific author of numerous Catholic books, and he's written an article about St. Augustine for the National Catholic Register, and we'll be talking about how we can connect Pope Leo, of course, to his favorite saint, who's St. Augustine, with his feast day being upon us. So we look forward to talking to Mike later in the program. Check out my series, They Might Be Saints. It airs every week. It's about Americans on the path to sainthood. It airs on EWTN, and we look at the lives of servants of God, venerables, and blesseds before they have all their miracles and are declared saints by Rome. And so we'd like to present these lives of Americans who will be considered saints someday, and they might be saints, as we call them in the title. And so in this particular episode is an interesting one. It's about Father Nelson Baker. I examine the canonization cause for Father Nelson Baker, a former business owner who built a world-class city of charity with an orphanage, home for troubled youth, schools, a hospital, and a basilica well into his 70s. So absolutely amazing. We'll be presenting that They Might Be Saints, Father Nelson Baker, on Sunday, August 31st at 1:30 p.m. And take a look at my other series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, where I travel to places of miracles all around the world. And on Wednesday, September 3rd, I look at the Holy House of Loretto, which is where the Virgin Mary is believed to have lived and received the Annunciation. But how did it get from Nazareth to its current home in Italy? I investigate the claims that this is the true House of Mary. Check that one out, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Loretto, on Wednesday, September 3rd. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today, we've got Blessed Maria Raffles Bruna, who lived from 1781 to 1853 in Spain. And the 365 Days with Mary project for today is Our Lady of the Well from Capurso in Italy in the year 1705. And the question of the week, it's a good one. When a group of martyrs is considered for sainthood, if one of the martyrs does not qualify, are all the rest then disqualified? We'll try to answer that one later in the show. And the miracle of the day is the relics of Saint Alexander of Svir in Russia, which were found incorrupt in the year 1641. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we report on miracles happening around the world and those things that relate to miracles. And while we don't have big miracle news to share with you this week, I thought this was an interesting thing that I posted on the Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. And you can go to Facebook and search for The Miracle Hunter, and you can get my posts about miracles happening all around the world and those things that I find interesting, like this new study that came out that is finding that Mary is a significant factor in discerning and sustaining the call to priestly and religious life, according to a new study. So there was a research coming out of the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown University, and it came out with a report sort of that kind of looked at the background of vocations and religious life, how they came to be. And it made public a new report entitled The Impact of Mary, Mother of the Church, on Ecclesial Vocations. And that came out in July. And it's quite an article, because it goes through quite a study. It goes through the Marian dimension of the church and how various people, when they discern a vocation, and we saw amongst The groups polled, an average of 59% said Marian devotion had either a meaningful or great impact on their discernment of a vocation to serve Jesus Christ and his church. And of the groups, religious priests at 71% were the most likely to cite Marian devotion, while deacon directors were the least likely. And so they go through all these stats and details, which are interesting. And the rosary topped the list of the most common Marian devotional practices when people discerned a vocation, with 71% having that private devotion, and 52% saying they prayed the rosary with others. In praying before images of Mary, whether icons, statues, or paintings, were cited by 40% of the respondents. And when we talk about Marian apparitions and things like medals, survey respondents also said that they often or always wear the miraculous medal they associated with St. Catherine Labouré, and the bronze scapular was another popular one at 29%, or another Marian medal at 18%. And they also talked about pilgrimages to Marian apparition sites that led to their vocation in the church, and they were noted by 44% of all respondents, with Our Lady of Guadalupe at 29% and Lourdes at 28% as the most popular of those Marian apparition sites visited. And they also talked about meaningful Marian titles yielding a high response rate. So 84% of the participants listed a combined 128 distinct Marian titles. Most popular, Mary Mother of God, Our Lady of Perpetual Help, Mary Mother of the Church, Mary Undoer of Knots, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Mother of Sorrows, Theotokos, that's the God-bearer, Queen of Peace, Our Lady of Good Counsel, and Immaculate Heart were the most popular of all these. So quite interesting to see the Marian devotion of future priests and those entering religious life. And you can check out the link to this article if you connect to the Facebook page on The Miracle Hunter. Each week we ask a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. People who know me, my friends, they know that I love trivia, and you might find me at a pub night in a bar somewhere some night, but hey, this is Catholic Pub Trivia, so it's just a little bit different. But if you think you know the answer and want to win the prize, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and we'll see who's the fastest with the correct answers, and answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. So the question from last week, who is the oldest venerable, blessed, or saint from the United States at the time of their death? And the answer is the oldest American venerable at the time of her death appears to be Mother Mary Elizabeth Lange, who passed away on February 3rd, 1882, at the age of 98. And that's according to the Maryland State Archives. And if you put that into context, other notable venerables at the age of their death, Venerable Rose Hawthorne, she died at the age of 75 in 1926, and Pierre Toussaint, who died in 1766, or lived from 1766 to 1853, that would be at the age of 87. And there's numerous others we could also consider as well, but from what I can tell, the oldest venerable was Mother Mary Lange, passing away at the age of 98. So thanks so much for everyone who wrote in with that answer. This week's question is also a good one. Which immediate family has the most saints, blesseds, venerables, or servants of God when you add them all up? So we're not looking for a legacy of saints or generations of saints. There are definitely people who from generation to generation have saints in their family, saintly bloodlines, as some people might want to say. I'm talking about in the immediate family, a mother or a father or children, brothers and sisters. Which family has the most people, either saints or on the path to sainthood? So if you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be the one with the right answer. And answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Mike Aqualina about St. Augustine, the favorite saint of Pope Leo XIV. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Well, so many people are excited about the new Pope and, of course, are wanting to know everything they can about him. And one of the things that we can draw from the words of the Pope, especially his early words and even his motto, is that he's a devotee of St. Augustine. And I think that reflecting on what the life of St. Augustine here with his feast day upon us this week, I think is a great thing to get to know our own Pope just a little bit more. Well, we're so excited today to be joined by Mike Aqualina, author of numerous Catholic books, and he's written articles and otherwise about Pope Leo and the Augustinian connection. Welcome back to the show today, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Michael.
It's great to talk with you again. And, of course, we have the feast day this week of St. Augustine and a pope who has a devotion and his vocation otherwise are connected to St. Augustine. Tell us a little bit about what we know about Pope Leo and his Augustinian connection.
Well, he identified himself from the beginning as a son of St. Augustine, an Augustinian, a son of St. Augustine. And in his case, that's true in many ways. He's not just someone who was influenced by St. Augustine, but he's someone who took on the Augustinian form of life. Now, the Augustinians are a religious order, and they adopted the rule of St. Augustine in the Middle Ages, and so they made a certain effort to follow the spirituality of St. Augustine. Augustine is hugely influential. We might even say that his spirituality is the foundation of Western spirituality. It's the default spirituality of Christians in the West, and that's true of not only Roman Catholics, but also Protestants, because John Calvin and Martin Luther tried to identify themselves with the teaching of St. Augustine, and Luther had even been an Augustinian monk himself. So this is an important part of our Western heritage, because Augustine is the most important figure in that heritage. Some people would say, no, it's St. Thomas Aquinas, but St. Thomas Aquinas quotes St. Augustine more than any other saint outside the sacred scripture. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which was produced back in the 1990s, quotes St. Augustine more than any other figure outside the sacred scriptures. So we're talking about a giant figure in history, but this is someone whom our current Pope has taken as a special model. The focus of all of his graduate studies, the focus of his private devotion. When he went out there, and made his first address to the crowd after being elected, he quoted St. Augustine, and he took St. Augustine, a line from St. Augustine in the "One We Are One" as his motto. So you can see that he has a special identification, a special attachment to the person of St. Augustine. He's going to be a focal point of his teaching. He already is. And he also is someone he invokes whenever he can. We have great addresses from our current Holy Father already in these first 100 days of his pontificate, and he's already quoting Augustine all over the place and using Augustine as the point man for his teaching on the Eucharist, on religious life, you name it. He's using St. Augustine's teachings.
Yeah, amazing. And when we talk about St. Augustine, a saint of the 4th and 5th centuries, we talk about somebody who had a very long life, and he was a prolific writer, you might say, incredible amount of sermons, letters, poems, books, memoirs, things of this nature. Can we summarize what Augustine's focus was, or what is our best way to view the collective work of St. Augustine?
That's a great question, because he did write in many different genres. He published poetry. He won awards for his poetry. He wrote a memoir, and not only that, he's said to have invented the genre of memoir, the genre of autobiography in his Confessions. He also wrote works that are foundational in many different fields of study. He wrote the foundational book in catechetics. He also wrote the foundational book in the West in the field of Trinitarian theology. He wrote the foundational book in morals. You can go down the list of different subspecialties in theology, and you're going to find Augustine among the required reading authors. So it is hard to narrow him to one piece. I'd say that if you want to get a sense of the basic Augustine, well, you go to those memoirs, you go to the Confessions, because in the course of those memoirs, he does work his way from the basic data of his life, the events of his life, to Trinitarian theology by the time you get to the end of the book. So you could see an integration of both his faith and his life in that particular book. So the Confessions, I'd say, is where you'd go if you wanted to begin.
We're talking today with Mike Aqualina about St. Augustine, the patron saint, you might say, of Pope Leo, who is a great devotee of St. Augustine, and his papacy has been molded by the writings and influence of this great saint. And when we talk about that motto, you talked about the Pope drawing his motto from a line from St. Augustine. Where is that line found, or what if you had to kind of expound on the meaning of that one line, what would you say?
That's another great question. Now, that the line is found in his reflections on the Psalms. It's one of his largest works because it goes through the entire Psalter, which is the largest book of the Bible. We're talking about 150 Psalms here. He goes through and he gives an extended kind of line by line reflection on each of the Psalms. In this particular line, he says, "In the one we are one," and it's an important line for the way Augustine views the church and the way he views Jesus Christ, the way he views the sacraments. It's all summed up in that little phrase there that the Pope has chosen as his motto. Augustine had this idea of the totus Christus, the whole Christ, right? Which is, not just the historical Jesus, but Jesus Christ, as he's gone through his paschal mystery, as he's ascended into glory in heaven, and now he has gathered all things to himself. Now he is one with the church. He's in communion with the church, his bride, and we are said to be members of his body. This is a powerful idea, and Augustine really makes the most of this. When he talks about the church, he's talking about Jesus Christ. He uses them as identical terms, which Jesus himself did. Think about when he went to St. Paul, and he says to St. Paul, "Saul, Saul, why have you persecuted me?" He didn't say, "Why have you persecuted my body?" as if it's something distinct from him. No, he's one with the church. So Augustine, in this passage, in his reflections on the Psalms, talks about the sacrament. He talks about the Eucharist and how the Eucharist makes us one, and it's how in that sacrament we're made one, and we become the Lord's body. It's a powerful, powerful reflection, and I talked about that quite a bit, I believe, in what I wrote for the National Catholic Register right after the election, that this is a powerful point for many reasons, because it brings together different aspects of his theology in one simple phrase.
And if we had to draw out sort of the impact or the influence of or the otherwise we see Saint Augustine alive in the Augustinian spirituality even today. How could we sort of characterize that charism that even the Pope subscribes to, you might say?
Well, there's a certain interiority, a certain self-reflection and examining of one's own life. Augustine is famous for doing this because that's the point of his Confessions. But the Confessions isn't merely an autobiography. It's a confession. The book itself is not addressed to the reader. It's addressed to God. And we get to eavesdrop on Augustine's dialogue with God and how he figures out the meaning of his life. So there's an element of interiority that's essential to the Augustinian tradition. There's also an appreciation for nature, a deep appreciation for creation, for what God has done in creating the world and creating the human being, that there's a certain glory to be found in all of these things that God has given us. But we need to see the glory itself as a sign of a greater glory. And we need to love the greater glory that has given us creation. We run into trouble, Augustine would tell us, when we make the things of this world kind of an ultimate destination, whether if we stop at those and we don't give thanks for them, and if we don't give praise for them, we end up worshiping the things of this world. We end up attached to them. We end up making them ultimate in our lives. And this is how we get bad habits. This is how we get addictions, because we make something other than God primary in our life. This has been the reflection of many thinkers down the ages, but Augustine was really the one who brought the whole dynamic to the forefront in talking about spirituality. Another thing that you'll find in the Augustinian tradition is a sustained reflection on sacred scripture and the ability to find Christ all through the sacred scripture, not just in the Gospels, not just in the life of Christ, but to see Jesus Christ as prefigured in the entire Old Testament, so that the whole Bible speaks to us of Christ. Christ is the culmination of all of the history of Israel. Christ is the culmination and the fulfillment of all of the prophecies of ancient Israel. Christ is the reason for history, and we see him shot through the pages of the Bible. So all of these things we'll find in any Augustinian spirituality. And again, I think we'll find them just as the fundamental spirituality of Western Christianity itself, even its apostolic drive, its outward movement is something that we've learned from St. Augustine. Sure, it's there in the Gospel, but it was Augustine who really refined it for us.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Mike Aqualina about St. Augustine, his influence on the Pope and on Christianity and on the world. And I think when some people think of St. Augustine, and perhaps even specifically his memoir, The Confessions, they focus on the incredible conversion story of St. Augustine. And I think that's kind of a personal reflection, but also it's something that we can all take from, something that's universal to us as humans. Talk about the conversion story a little bit and how we can all draw from that.
Well, Augustine was brought up in a Christian home. He had a Christian mother. His father really wasn't interested in religion much at all. His father was not a Christian. So, Augustine's father was not helpful in his religious formation. In fact, he encouraged a lot of bad patterns of thought in Augustine. Augustine's mother, on the other hand, Monica, did encourage him to grow in the Christian faith, and when he kind of veered from it, when he went into adolescent rebellion, it broke her heart. It really did, and she tried her hardest to get Augustine to come around. He went away for studies to the big city, to Carthage, the major city in North Africa, and he did his studies there, but he also was tempted by many different forms of sin. He started to indulge himself in womanizing, and he became involved with a woman. He got her pregnant. He was cohabiting with her, and they were living together in sin outside marriage, and this distressed Monica. She went there to try to bring Augustine around once again, and whenever he tried to go home, so one time she barred the door. She wouldn't let him come in with his mistress, and later on she relented and allowed them to come together. What we see, though, is the importance of his mother and her perseverance in prayer, first of all, right? But also in witness, that she was willing to go the extra mile to remain in his life. And that required heroic measures at that time, because there was no telephone. There was no Zoom meeting. There was no way to stay in touch unless you were nearby. So when Augustine took a better job in Rome, Monica followed him all the way across the ocean to Rome. And then when Augustine went to Milan, she moved to Milan. She really did try to stay in his life in the way she knew how. It wasn't going to be through phone calls. It wasn't going to even be through letters, because you never knew whether your letters would get to the destination. But for 17 years, she prayed perseveringly, even though he did not encourage her prayers, and he seemed to resist them. And eventually, she got what she wanted, but more importantly, God got what he wanted, because God was not as much interested in Augustine becoming a Catholic as Monica becoming a saint. and it was Monica who became a saint through the waiting, the perseverance, and those prayers for 16, 17 years.
Amazing reflection. There's hope for all of us, I think, in the story of Augustine.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Mike Aqualina, for taking us through the life of St. Augustine and his influence with Pope Leo and in Christianity in general. I know that you're leading a pilgrimage to Sicily. I just led a pilgrimage to Milan, Turin, Florence, and Rome. So I just got back from Italy myself, and your trip to Sicily sounds amazing. And St. Augustine has even said some things about Sicily in his writings. Talk a little bit about this trip you got coming up.
He has. Well, he saw Sicily as a place of natural marvels. You know, he wrote about the various phenomena that he had heard about on the island there, and these include, of course, things that we today understand as phenomena related to the volcano there, and other things. But he found Sicily. Or he knew Sicily to be a place of miracles, wonders, and marvels, and a place of great natural beauty. And there is all of that, but there's also the history of the church, especially the early church. Sicily is the home of St. Lucy and St. Agatha, patroness of ailments of the eye and the patroness of ailments of the breast. And so we'll be venerating these saints, visiting the sites related to their martyrdom, and learning a bit about the history of the early church as we go through the different sites in Sicily. So I'm excited about it. I'm really, really charged up to go, and that'll be this December, the first week of December, and it'll be with 206 Tours.
Wonderful. I do my pilgrimages with them as well, so I think that'll be a great one. People can sign up or find out more at 206tours.com and search for Mike Aqualina. And your website, Mike, where can people go to find out more about you?
FathersOfTheChurch.com, FathersOfTheChurch.com.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Mike Aqualina, for joining us on today's date, this week of the feast day of St. Augustine, talking about that great saint and his influence on our new pope and on our church. Thank you so much, Mike, for being with us on today's show.
Thanks again for having me on, Michael.
God bless. That was Mike Aqualina. Check out his pilgrimage to Sicily. Go to 206tours.com for more information on that. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I like hearing what people are thinking about, and people pepper me with questions all the time. I've got a pretty interesting email inbox, as you might imagine, with the people writing in from countries around the world about miracles. And I love actually answering questions in person, not just over email. So I travel around. I give talks at different Catholic shrines and parishes and conferences, and I speak for about 45 minutes about Eucharistic miracles or Marian apparitions or some other type of miracle, or how the Church investigates the miraculous. And then I usually open it up to questions, and people ask some pretty good ones for 15, 20, 30 minutes. I get to hear what people are thinking about in the world of miracles, and I do my best to answer them. So if you want to invite me to your parish, you can send me an email. Just go to my website, actually. Go to miraclehunter.com and click on the Contact tab, and you can send me a message that way, and you can invite me to speak to your parish sometime soon. Let's take a look at the question for today from the email inbox. This is a question from Bill. Bill asks, when a group of martyrs is considered for a sainthood cause, if one of the martyrs does not qualify, are the rest disqualified? And so, again, that question is, if you have a group of martyrs and one person in that group somehow is not considered, does that rule out everyone? Well, it's a great question. And so thanks, Bill, for that question. And it's a good one. And, of course, there are different types of these groupings of saints. We talk about those people who are killed in odium fidei, out of hatred for the faith. Those are those large groups of martyrs. The martyrs of Oronto, I think, are maybe the largest group of martyrs like that. And they don't necessarily look at the individual cases. Everybody has to be proven to have existed. They have a record of their birth and life and all these things, but they don't sort of beatify them individually. They lump them together in a group. So the question really gets to the heart of, if you have a group, perhaps a smaller group than the Martyrs of Oronto, and one of the people either gets disqualified for not having died out of hatred for the faith, they died for some other reason, political or otherwise, or perhaps they weren't killed in that way, or perhaps they didn't have sort of that requisite life of virtue that they like to look at that would qualify them for a martyr. What happens if they rule out one and leave the rest? Well, it seems like what they do is they'll modify the canonization cause in the people who are considered in the whole process. They don't do that after the declaration of someone being blessed or a martyr. They do that in the process as they submit it to Rome, and Rome comes back with feedback on who should be included or who shouldn't in the proposed canonization cause. And of course, we have this new path to sainthood from Pope Francis, Oblatio Vitae, that's the free will offering of one's life. And in the case of the Shreveport martyrs, for example, whose closing of their cause is this weekend, or this week, I should say, we see that there are 5 priests who are being considered for canonization. So they look at each of those individual lives specifically in such a small group like that. Well, thanks, Bill, for your question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. For today's date, we've got Our Lady of the Well from Capurso in Italy in the year 1705. And we always try to find the Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. You all know Fatima, May 13th, or Lourdes, February 11th, or Guadalupe, December 12th. But, believe it or not, there's a different Marian devotion that lines up exactly and precisely to each day of the calendar year from countries all around the world. And it's a fun project because we get to see how Mary is honored around the world by the faithful and how she's venerated. And we talk about the dates of great miracles happening, or feast days, or the building of basilicas, or other ways that Mary is honored. And so that's what this project is all about. So for today's date, Our Lady of the Well from Capurso in Italy, and that is the town of Capurso in Bari on the east coast of southern Italy, claims Our Lady of the Well as its patron, under the title of Madonna del Pozzo. And tradition says that it was on August 30th, 1705, that the image of Our Lady, sculpted in wood, was found in a well. It is now preserved in the Basilica of Santa Maria del Pozzo, the construction of which began in 1770. And on May 20th, 1852, the image of the Blessed Mother was solemnly crowned. Headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, where I'm from, the Society of Our Lady of the Holy Mary of Pozzo, dedicated to Madonna del Pozzo and her traditions, were established in 1922. And the society has its origins at Capurso. And so that is today's 365 Days with Mary devotion of the day, Our Lady of the Well from Capurso in Italy. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can go to 365dayswithmary.com, pick up the book, download the free app from the iOS App Store, or join any of the 10,000 followers on Facebook who get a different Marian devotion each and every day of the calendar year. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week, where we look at each day throughout Christian history and find a miracle that happened on that date. And so for today's date, we have August 30th in the year 1641. And it is the story of the finding of the relics of St. Alexander of Severe. And during church reconstruction in 1641, the incorrupt relics of St. Alexander were revealed on August 30th, further solidifying his veneration. And during a second uncovering in December 1997, His relics were found to continue producing a fragrant myrrh. And there are numerous saints who have this, they're not numerous, but there are some saints who have this this quality associated with the relics. And St. Andrew in Amalfi Coast, I think, is one of the other ones that you see a fragrant myrrh associated with their bones. And so that is the relic of St. Alexander of Sphere, today's miracle of the day. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. We do this every week where we look at who might be saints, or the saints coming down the pipeline, as we can say. And so in June, the Holy Father, Pope Leo XIV, that was the last time the Pope has made any pronouncements on miracles. He received in audience His Eminence Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect for the dicastery for the cause of saints. And during this audience, the Pope authorized the same dicastery to promulgate the decree regarding the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Teresa Tambelli, born Maria Olga. She's a professed nun of the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. And she was born January 17th, 1884 in Revere in Italy, and died on February 23rd, 1964 in Cagliari in Italy. And she was, according to the website of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, she was a professed nun of the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. She devoted herself steadfastly to the education and Christian formation of even the most disadvantaged children and youth, and she lived her religious vocation faithfully, expressing it with joy in the places where her superiors sent her to work. And that is the new Venerable Teresa Tambelli. With one miracle, she'll be declared a blessed. With a second miracle, she will be a saint. And let's take a look at the might-be saint of the day. We try to find a saint whose feast day or death anniversary lines up exactly to the day's date. So for today, August 30th, we have Blessed Maria Raffles Bruna, who lived from 1781 to 1853 in Spain. And she was born on November 5th in 1781 at Vilafranca at Penedès in Barcelona in Spain. And she was born to a working-class family, and she completed her education at a boarding school in Barcelona, where she joined a group of 12 young women under the direction of Father Juan Bonal, who administered Our Lady of Grace Hospital in Saragossa in Spain. And the small community was dedicated to serving the most helpless, sick, the mentally ill, the abandoned children, the disabled, and became the Sisters of Charity of St. Anne. Now, at the age of 23, Maria was appointed superior of the group, a position that often put her in conflict with hospital employees, but during the Napoleonic Wars, she worked in the bombed ruins to save the sick and children, and she even ventured into the enemy camp to plead with the French general for help with the sick and wounded. She worked tirelessly for the approval of her small community, and in 1825 their community took the first public vows. She was a victim of slander and was imprisoned during the Carlist War, but was later released. She died on August 30th, 1853 in Zaragoza of natural causes, and declared venerable in 1991 and blessed by Pope John Paul II on October 16th, 1994, and that's today's might-be saint of the day, Blessed Maria Raffles Bruna from Spain. With one more miracle, she will be called Saint Maria. And for people who want to check out my series, They Might Be Saints, or pick up my book, They Might Be Saints, which is available at EWTNRC.com, you can tune in on August 31st at 1:30 p.m. Central Time to They Might Be Saints, Father Nelson Baker. I examine the canonization cause of Father Nelson Baker, a former business owner who built a world-class city of charity with an orphanage, home for troubled youth, schools, and a hospital and a basilica. Check that one out. They Might Be Saints, Father Nelson Baker, Sunday, August 31st at 1:30 p.m. Central Time.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Growing up in the Chicagoland area, there was an order of nuns that was very important to me and my family, and that was the Little Sisters of the Poor. And going to their homes for the elderly throughout Chicago, we'd often go there for Mass and to do volunteer work or just to visit the sisters or the elderly there. That was part of my life growing up. And so we often learned about the life of the foundress of the Little Sisters of the Poor, and that was St. Jeanne Jugan. And she was blessed, Jeanne Jugan, at the time that I was there or visiting there. And at some point along the way, she was recognized as a saint, which, as we talk about often on the show, requires an intercessory miracle, both for beatification and a subsequent one for canonization. And so there are very, very few cases in the United States of miracles that are validated, used for canonization causes. Almost all of them are for American saints and future saints. It is a very rare thing when there is a saint from another country that uses a miracle from the United States. St. Faustina is a very famous example of that, and there are others as well. St. Peter Claver is from Colombia, is another one who has an American miracle. But Jeanne Jugan is one of these rare examples, and Dr. Ed Gatz is the person who received that miracle, and that led to her canonization. So we're so grateful today to have a very special guest, one of these extremely rare people whose miracle was validated by Rome. And we welcome to the program today, Dr. Ed Gatz.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Ed. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today, and it's great that you're able to tell the story of you and your wife, this journey, learning about St. Jeanne Jugan and seeking her out and getting her intercession for a miracle that it turns out really saved your life, because the doctors were telling you that you only had a short amount of time to live, days or weeks perhaps. So I'm sure you're quite grateful for her intercession on this. So let's just paint the picture a little bit as far as what you were going through medically, the situation that you were going through. So when did this all occur, and what was your condition that you were experiencing and your prognosis?
My story would probably start in January of 1989. I had been practicing medicine, specifically anesthesiology, and my partner said that I need to be checking my esophagus because my sounds are changing over the weeks. And this is the first time I had vacation, was in January of 89. And so I went in Monday morning, and they did some x-rays. When I awakened, he showed it to me. I had cancer of the esophagus. They found cancer in the stomach, cancer tumors in the abdomen. They probably expanded into the spine, and they said that I had less than a couple of months to live. That there are no survivors of cancer of the esophagus that are 4B. That's the worst of the worst, for more than 6 months. In fact, no one ever made 6 months. So they suspected that I just had a few weeks to go. I refused radiation, or I refused other procedures because I figured I had a short life, and why would I want to be miserable with medical problems? So my brother-in-law was a physician. He had trained at the Mayo Clinic. He said I needed to go to the Mayo Clinic to be evaluated to see what could be done. Could they try to do surgery and so on? We did. They did accept me to do radical surgery. After 6.5 hours of surgery, they came up with the idea that I probably had a couple of months to live. A fellow, our physician from 2 different departments, came in and offered me to give radiation or other chemotherapy attacks on the cancer. And I said, no, with less than a couple of months to live. Why would I want to be sick because of medical procedures?
Now, when you received that news, that very negative diagnosis, what was your attitude or feeling like when you were told that you had so little time left to live?
I was very thankful that I had outlived my dad, who died at 39, and I never got to know him, and my mom, who died at 45, and I was 14, 15 when she died, and had no brothers or sisters. So I was able to find an aunt and uncle who would see me through high school.
Now, from what I understand, it was your wife or other people who had the devotion to St. Jeanne Jugan, not you necessarily. So how did she convince you to pray this novena and to seek out the intercession of Blessed Jeanne Jugan?
None of that is exactly correct. When I was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, she was just heart sick, and she called Father McLean, a Jesuit priest at Creighton University, told him what the doctors had done to evaluate me and what my future was. And what she just says, I'm just deadly upset. And he thought for a while, came back and said, well, you, Jeanne, and I, Father McLean, will say daily novenas for the improvement of Ed's health and for a cure, and we'll do it each and every day for as long as he's alive. So I found that out, and I thought, well, that's nice of them to do that. But I accepted it as having been very fortunate to have outlived my mom and dad. So they never gave it up. I don't think either one of them ever quit or missed a day. About 6 or 7 years later, we were leaving town, and I saw Father McLean, and Jeanne was with me. And he said, by the way, I don't think I'll be here when you come back in March because I'm about to die. My cancer's bad. I just want you to know. And I said novenas for prayers. I prayed for the improvement and survival of 4 other people who did receive miracles also. I said, Father, you have 4 other miracles plus mine for 5? Oh, yes, absolutely. I said, Father, you're just amazing. I can't believe this. And that was a fact. I knew 1, maybe 2 of them, but the others I didn't. And by that time, I'd already lived at about 10 years beyond my less than 6 months to live.
Talk about your recovery. What happened? How did you know that this was, in fact, a miracle happening? And what did the doctors do or say to sort of say this was without natural explanation?
I went back to Mayo Clinic 4 weeks after the medical surgery to find out how bad it was and what else is involved and get more information. And when I arrived there and had the studies, they said, we don't see any cancer. And I thought, well, they're not very good. Something's wrong. They don't want to talk to me about this or something. So I went to Chicago to a good physician that I had gotten to know and had him examine me. He says, there's no cancer. He says, I don't know how all this happened, but they did radical surgery on you. They removed all your esophagus except 1 and 2. 3 through 12 were removed. Half the stomach was removed. They removed the tumor in the abdomen. Cancer in the spine is still there, and so on. He says, so I don't know how all this happened. So I just lived with the fact that the doctors at the Mayo Clinic may have been wrong, and that the physicians I practiced with at Bergen Mercy Hospital in Omaha were examining me every month, and sometimes in between, because they didn't believe this either. And it was a weekly test, and then there were monthly examinations for the first year. The second year was maybe every second month. And that continued up until the end of the 5 years when they said, this is a miracle. You had cancer, but you don't have cancer now. And whenever I go back there, the fact they say, there comes miracle Dr. Gatz. Dr. Gatz received a miracle. And I said, I did, but it had nothing to do with me. I never prayed for a day or a week. My wife and Father McLean were the 2 that were working on it. I just was amazed what was happening as a physician.
So what was it like working with the canonization cause for St. Jeanne Jugan? Were you interviewed exhaustively, and did you have to supply all the medical records? How did that work as far as them investigating this alleged miracle at the time?
Yes, from the very beginning, my wife wanted to find somebody to pray to, and she was checked with some nuns in Kansas City, and they were followers of Jeanne Jugan, and she had never been alive in the last year. 150 years, I think, has been since she died. But a lot of people have been praying to her and getting the parts of their lives improved. So so they agreed to get all their nuns to start praying for a miracle also.
And as you know, as you're very well aware, there have been very, very few cases of intercessory healing miracles in the United States validated by Rome, and far fewer for saints from other countries, even almost none. How does it make you feel to be in this very select company and to have received this miracle?
Well, when people ask questions like yours, I tried to find out the answers, and the answer was there have been no miracles by Rome. Lots of people have said that they've had miracles and they're still alive and they're fighting for miracles. One of them is a good friend, and he's been fighting it for over 30 years. He was the chief of creating Boys Town, a wonderful priest, but he had such an extensive life around the globe that for them to do research, they're still at it. At the point they make that no one has ever been, and they wanted him to be the first. And they really didn't want to accept my miracle, even though Rome said it was. They're still fighting for him.
Well, we're grateful to you, Dr. Ed Gatz, for joining us on today's program and for telling us about your incredible and rare healing miracle through the intercession of St. Jeanne Jugan, the foundress of the Little Sisters of the Poor. Thank you so much, Dr. Ed, for joining us on today's program.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It truly is a miracle.
And that was Dr. Ed Gatz telling us his incredible miracle story. For more information on St. Jeanne Jugan or the Little Sisters of the Poor, the community that she founded, you can go to littlesistersofthepoor.org for more information.
And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Dr. Ed Gatz, talking about the canonization miracle of St. Jeanne Jugan, and Mike Aqualina joining us to talk about St. Augustine. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, about Our Lady of Loreto. The Holy House of Loreto is where the Virgin is believed to have lived and received the Annunciation, but how did it get from Nazareth to its current home in Italy? I'll be investigating that one. Check that one out on Wednesday, September 3rd. Explore with the Miracle Hunter, Loreto. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.